What's happening, people? I'm DJ Graish, and in today's stream we're doing a beginner's guide to liquid drum and bass. So let me know if you can see me, let me know if you can hear me, and let me know if the stream's working alright. So this is going to be a complete beginner's guide. So I'm going to explain a bit about how to use Ableton Live and a bit about how to get started making your first liquid track. So we'll just wait for a few more people to join and then we'll get started. And if anyone's there in the chat, just let us know if you can hear me fine. Let me know if you can hear the music fine. And let me know if you can see the screen fine. Big up everyone who's been watching my tutorials, everyone who's subscribed to the channel. Big up everyone who's learned something from these tutorials and live streams. And feel free to post links to your SoundCloud or your Bandcamp or anywhere else you've got your tracks, especially if you learned how, you learned some techniques of how to produce from this channel. I'd love to see how you're doing and follow along with your progress. Anyway, I'm going to start a new Ableton Live set now and get started. Alright, so when you start a new Ableton Live set, this is what it looks like. So you've got, by default, it gives you 2 MIDI tracks and 2 audio tracks. Now these are different types of tracks. In a MIDI track, it allows you to put in MIDI notes and basically play virtual instruments or samplers. And in audio tracks, it allows you to bring in audio clips and also record audio. So obviously they all play sounds, but you can see the difference from in an empty MIDI track. You've just got these dots which signify the MIDI information. And if I turn on the computer MIDI keyboard and just arm one of these tracks, now when I press a key, you can see that it shows you the velocity of the key press there. Now obviously this is an empty track, so it's not going to make any sound yet. But just to demonstrate that that's what it shows you. And when I finally put an instrument in here, then I'll be able to play it on the keyboard. As for the audio tracks, well, you can just drag in from your browser over here. You can go to where your samples are. You can drag in samples and they'll appear here. And you can also hit record and record some sounds in. So some other things that are pretty important to know about Ableton Live. In the top left, we've got this BPM counter. Now, if you're making house music or something, you'll have it on 128. If you're making breaks or something, you might have it at 130 something, and going up. Jungle tempo is like 150, 160. And then if we want to make a liquid drum and bass track, we're going to put it to 174 or 175. Other than that, as a beginner, you don't really need to know what any of these things are. But obviously here in the middle, this is pretty important. So you've got the play, the stop, and the record buttons. This one here is also quite important, and that's the loop button. So when you turn that on, you've got this loop marker, which you can move around. So say for example you want to just start off by making a 4-bar loop, you'll have that there, and watch the playhead. As it moves along, it's moving through the bars, and when it gets to 4 bars, it goes back to the beginning. So that's looping around, you know. And as you can see at the bottom here, it says drag audio effects here. You can also, at the bottom here, it says drag files and devices. So whenever you want to start a new idea or bring in a new sampler or a new instrument, you can just drag it to that area and it will make the appropriate track for it. So if it's some kind of VST instrument, it will make a new MIDI track for it. Now, speaking about MIDI tracks, a lot of people like to start with their drums when it comes to DNB, which is fine, and sometimes I do that, but a lot of the time I like to start with some kind of melodic idea, just so that we've got a chord structure in place, and then that way you can write your bass line that goes along with those chords and stuff like that, you know. So with that being said, if you go to instruments and then instrument rack, then you can find all these different types of instruments here, and you might want to start off with some kind of piano. So you've got E pianos. So let's have a listen to a couple of these, and maybe we'll start with one of these. So as you click on them, it just gives you a little bit of a preview of what that piano is going to sound like, just by playing you one note. And then when you drag it in, you'll be able to choose what notes it's going to play. So let's just start off with E piano old school. And you can see it says where it says drop files and devices here. I'm just going to drop it there, and as you can see, it's started its own MIDI track. But what you can also do is, you see you've got those 2 MIDI tracks at the top. You can drag it to there as well, and it'll put it on there. So what I usually like to do is only really start off with the track that I want to use. So here you can see we had those default 2 MIDI tracks and 2 audio tracks. Now they're just going to get in the way, and they're all empty, and as you've just seen, whenever you need to create a new instrument, it'll just make its own track anyway. So we might as well delete these 4 and just stick with the one track that we're actually going to be using. Okay, now when it comes to actually putting in the notes for this E piano, there's a few different ways you can do it. One of them is, as I showed you before, if you go to options here and turn on this computer MIDI keyboard, then this will turn your computer keyboard into like a musical keyboard, and you need to arm this MIDI track here with this red button over to the right. Once that's done, you'll be able to play your computer keyboard like a musical keyboard, and you can even do chords. And you can press record and record in the notes that way. Or, needless to say, if you've got your own MIDI keyboard and you've got that plugged in, you'll be able to play that. Or if you've got a different kind of controller like the Ableton Push, you can play your notes in that way. Or if you're not really that musical and you don't know how to play a keyboard, don't worry about it, because there's this other way where you just draw in the notes. So all you have to do is highlight an area like this, hold down Shift and Command and press M, and that's going to create a MIDI clip. Now a MIDI clip is basically just an area where you are able to draw in notes, and as you can see, I've made one that's 4 bars long, and that is going to loop because before I turned on the loop markers, right? So obviously there's no notes in it yet, but you can see when it gets to the end of the 4th bar, it goes back to the beginning again. So that's just going to keep looping around. So now, here at the bottom, you can see you've got a piano going up, and as you hover your mouse over all of the different notes on the piano, it's going to tell you what the notes are. And there is a little headphone symbol here, and when you turn on that headphone symbol and then you click these notes on the piano, it will allow you to hear them. So if you want to see this MIDI view a bit better, you can just drag from this line, drag that upwards and kind of make it a bit more full screen. All right, so now we can also zoom in on here. So you know that's a bit too low on the MIDI key on the keyboard, right? So that's going to be a bit bassy. So we want to be up here, somewhere in this region. So what you want to do is put your mouse here so it brings up the magnifying glass, and then click and drag sideways to the right. And what that's going to do is zoom in on this specific area of the keyboard so you can get a better view of it. And you're only really seeing the part that's actually relevant. So, you know, this sort of area here, it's not too high, it's not too low. It's just the right area for us to make some chords, which is going to be the basic chord structure of the track. So if you just double click here, it's going to put in a note and then you can drag it as long as you want. So when you play it, that's what it sounds like. Alright, so to make chords, they say that a chord is 3 or more notes together. Alright, so we've got the one note there. Now we're going to want another note that's going to complement that. So you can just click along this keyboard and listen out for another note that you think might go well with it. So maybe here, and then have a listen. So just press your space bar and you can play it and they sound alright together. And then maybe that one. So these three together. Alright. So let's drag those out a little bit longer. And then here at bar 2, we might want to put a different chord in. So you know, and a lot of it is trial and error and experimentation. So you might think, right, I'll do A and put some other notes that go with A. And then if it turns out that A doesn't go with it, you just delete and do something else. So A, you might think an A, a C, and an E could go together well. Another thing you can do is just highlight those three and then move them around with the arrows. So if you press down, now they don't all have to be 1 bar long, and actually it'd be better if you can make them different lengths and move them around and try and do something interesting with them. But just for the purposes of this demonstration, I'm just going to make 4 chords that are all 1 bar long. So what I was doing there is I was highlighting all the 3 notes of the chord and then press Command and D, and that's duplicate. So that basically just makes a copy of it, and then you can use your up and down arrows to move it around to put it where you want. Now once you've got those, you can even add some extra notes on top. So for example, these are all, as I say, they're 1 bar long for each chord. So you can just add halfway through each bar, for example here. So this one, let's listen to these 3 notes. You might decide that up there, this comes in halfway through the chord like this. And then this one, it might be there. So you just listen to them. So it goes C, D sharp, G, and it might be A sharp. So let's have a listen. And then the last one goes. Maybe it's C. Let's have a listen. See how that goes. And then you could take it a step further and divide it one more time. So it goes. So that could go to there. You know, so it goes. Like this. See, I want to put it there, but there is also already a note there. And it doesn't always have to go down, it could go up like this. You know. This is for the purposes of demonstration. So could it work if I put one there? Alright, so let's just say this is the chord structure we're going for, right? Now at some point you're going to want to save this. So the keyboard shortcut for saving is Command and S. So hold Command and press S. It's going to bring up a folder where you can put it. So usually you would have an Ableton Live Sets folder on your hard drive, and you can call this, I'm just going to call this a beginner's guide to liquid drum and bass. Press save. Alright, now anytime you want to save it now, you just press Command and S, and you don't have to rename it, it'll just sort of save it quickly. So now that we've got our chord structure in place, the next thing I'm going to do is get a drum rack and start to make the drums. So if you go into your instruments here, now there is all these different instruments in alphabetical order, so just grab the drum rack, drag that in where it says drop files and devices here. You just let go. It's going to make a new MIDI track and it's going to call it drum rack, and you'll see the drum rack here. Now what this is basically, if you've ever seen an MPC style drum machine and it's got those 16 pads, that's what this is. So it's got the 16 pads, but there's not just 16, because just to the left of it here, if you drag this up and down, you'll see that there's loads of different lots of 16. So this is just the first lot of 16, but if you do want to put more than 16 drums there, don't worry about it. There's loads of spaces. So at this point you are going to have some samples, like a sample pack of drum and bass samples on your hard drive. If you don't have that yet, all you need to do is go online, go on some kind of forum if you want. Like there's a forum called Dogs on Acid, which is a very famous drum and bass forum where you'll definitely be able to find some free DNB sample packs. They're everywhere basically. If you just Google free DNB sample pack, then I'm sure you'll find one. I've got a few here. I mean, I've got one that's literally just called drum and bass sample pack. So some of the ones in here are pretty good. So you can just start to drag them in. So one thing that I like to do is make the first column kicks, the second column snares, and then columns 3 and 4 can just be like hi-hats and bits of percussion and stuff. So as you can see, I've dragged a kick into the bottom left pad of the drum rack, and then I can get a snare. In fact, I like Rooftop and Parasite. So I'll put both of those in. And then Perk. You might find some hi-hats that you like. Maybe this Shaker 1 could be put in there somewhere. And in the meantime, while I'm looking, I'm just going to keep playing that piano. And by the way, let me just quickly mention some of these macros on the E-piano. So you've got bright and tone. So let me play it and I'll just fiddle with some of these and turn them up and down. So as you can hear, as I turn the brightness down on this E-piano, it gets less bright, as the name suggests. And then tone. Does something similar. And then there's amp. That kind of just makes it a bit sharper. And then space, I guess it adds reverb. Makes it sound like it's in a space. Alright, so whenever you drag in one of these instruments, you can always mess about with the different controls on there and just get it sounding exactly how you want it. Now, going back to looking for some drum samples, I've got a few go-tos. Jekyll and Hyde is one of them. You can literally just Google the names of the ones I'm using here. So Jekyll and Hyde free drum pack. Google it, you'll find it. Sorry if these are a bit loud. So go back to the drum rack. And by the way, whenever you put one of these in, there's a little snap button there. I like to turn that off because it seems to want to chop off the end of the sample and you don't want that. So just turn snapping off on each sample. And by the way, I want to give a shout out to a few people in the chat. So shout out Tara Bass, shout out Aaron303, and shout out DJ Fully Loaded. Thank you for joining me, and I hope you learned something from this tutorial. If you do, make sure you hit the like button, make sure you're subscribed, and make sure you let me know if you make a liquid tune, because I'd love to hear your progress. So these aren't really the kind of snares I'm going for, but let's see what else we've got. Now these little perk bits are like a little bit of chopped up break, and I do like to use these actually. I don't know why perk 2 is not being read, but perk 3 is pretty cool. So what I'm going to do with perk 3 is I'm going to put it into a pad, and you can see how it's actually 4 bits, 4 little shots within the sample. So what you can do is just bring the end marker back like that, so it's just the first one. So now it sounds like this. Then if you hold down the Alt button on your keyboard and drag that to another square, now it makes a copy of it, and then in this one you can select the next little bit of the perk. So now you've got these two, which you'll be able to use as a little shuffle later on. Alright, let's keep going. There's other DNB sample packs in here. So there's this one, Skillphonics Sounds 012. It's got kicks and snares in. So '03 could be pretty good. And in fact, I'll drag 01 in as well. Let's go to the snares. '09 could work. I still haven't really got any hats though. Alright, so I'm just going to keep going through my samples looking for a folder that's actually got some hats in it. Okay. And you might end up having some go-tos, you know, some samples that you always use. Anyway, that's enough of that. So, once you've got your drum rack kind of filled up with some sounds that you want to use, just like before, you drag a section like that and it's highlighted. You hold down Shift and Command, press M. It's going to create a MIDI clip. Now this time it's looking slightly different, because before you had the piano where you could play all the different notes up and down the piano. Now you've just got these, which is the samples that you've put in. Now at this point, I'm just going to turn on the metronome for a second. Now in the top left, you're going to see this button here, which is like a white dot and a black dot. And if you click that and then press spacebar, you hear that little tick-tock sound. It's called the metronome. It helps you keep time, right? So it makes sure that you are, especially if you're starting from scratch and there's nothing there, you are going to put your kicks and snares in the place where you want them. So what I'm going to do is just put in some snares, and with DNB, with like liquid DNB especially, you're probably going to just want to put them on the 2 and the 4. So here you've got the first bar, between the 1 there and the 2 there, you've got, it goes 1 and then it goes 1.2, 1.3, 1.4. So they are beats. So there's 4 beats to a bar, right? Now on beat 2, you might want to put a snare there, and then on beat 4, same again. And then to save you having to just keep doing that over and over again, what you can do is highlight the both and press Command and D, and it'll duplicate them to there. It'll duplicate them to there. Just keep pressing Command and D, and now you've got a snare on every beats 2 and 4. Right, I'm going to turn off the metronome now, because obviously we've got our piano that's sort of letting us know where we are anyway. So next thing we're going to want to do is choose one of these kicks. And the cool thing is, you don't necessarily have to choose which one it is now, because if you click on, see, I've chosen Snare Parasite just as a demonstration, right? But if I click Snare Parasite, look how now they've all got highlighted. Then using the arrows on your keyboard, if I decided, for example, that I wanted to use the rooftop snare instead, I just press down twice on the keyboard, and now, you know what I mean? And then if I wanted to use that other one up here, snare 1, I just go press up a load of times until it's there. And then there's another one. Now, I think for this tune, I think it's either Parasite or Rooftop are going to be the appropriate ones to use. So let's just keep it on Parasite for now, and maybe I'll change it in a bit. Now, let's move on to the kick. So make sure you've got that little headphone symbol turned on, and that's a way of auditioning them when you press on this little keyboard here. So this is rack kick, and then I've also got DNB kick 3. I've also got DNB kick 1 and 9. And I think it's pretty much rack is going to be the one. So again, draw in a little note. You're going to want one on the first beat, just right at the start, and then here you're going to want another one. So that's like, if you zoom in more, you're going to see we had our beats like 1, 2, 3, and 4, right? But then if you zoom in, you've got like in between the 3 and the 4, there's a 1.3.3, and that's where you want your other kick. And I know it's a bit complicated, but it sounds like this. Alright, so now, same as before, if we just highlight both of those and press Command and D, it's going to do a little copy of them. And then we can highlight all 4 and press Command and D again. Now we've got all of our kicks and snares in place, and if I press spacebar, it sounds like this. again, let me try rooftop snare. So Tara Base is asking, what's the reason to choose for this samples? So I'm guessing you mean why specifically these samples. And all it really is that I went through a load of kicks and snares and just chose ones that A, I like, and B, that seem to go well with liquid, and C, seem to go well with this particular little piano thing that I've made. So you just get an ear for what's going to work, you know, and I suppose that's something that you develop over time, but these kicks and snares seem like they're going to work with this chilled out liquid DNB tune, so that's the ones I've chosen. Anyway, now straight away I can hear that hats 4 and 5 are sounding too loud, so what we can do is, before even programming them in, we can turn them down, and there's a couple of ways of doing that. Way number 1. Here over on the side of the drum rack, there's a little button with some lines in it, and it's very tiny, but if you click that, it opens up this special mixer. And as you can see, it's got all of those samples down, and each one of them has a volume, right? So I was thinking that hats 4 and 5 were a bit too loud, so what I'm going to do is just drag that down to maybe 5.6 dB. Now, when we go back into our MIDI clip and I click here, they sound at a much more appropriate volume. In fact, you know what? I'm going to go a little bit further and put them down to -6.5. So now that they're at an appropriate level, we can start to kind of put in a pattern with them. So it's up to you if you want to do a slow pattern or a fast pattern. But this is a bit of a classic, so what you do is you get 2 hi-hats that sound similar but slightly different, and then if you do this pattern where it goes one then the other like that, it kind of makes this shuffle and it sounds like this. Alright, so let me just duplicate that so you can hear how it all sounds. Now you might be thinking it sounds a little bit robotic, and you'll be right. Well, what you can do about that is, if you just click the row, for example, hats 4, zoom right in, and then what you can do is hold down the command button and click this hi-hat and just gradually move it a little bit back. Now, if you're moving it back, then it basically means, if you imagine the drummer, he wasn't playing so robotically right on the grid. He was kind of a bit lazy with it, right? So let's have another listen. And in fact, you can do that with all the hats. You can move these back a little bit as well, but maybe move hats 5 back a bit and then move hats 4 back a bit more. And then he's like swinging these notes a bit more. Same with the shaker. If we're going to add this. Actually, I don't like that shaker, so forget it. Now these we're going to add these perks, but again, going back to this mixer view and turning that down, and we'll try 6.5 dB again. Maybe even more. Maybe I'll turn them down by 7. Now there's another question here. Juice Kicks Up says, I'm curious about the cool liquid bass lines, those super cool filtered modulated type sounds. So we are going to get to the bass after we've done the drums, and I will keep your question in mind, and we'll do some cool filtered modulated bass lines. So just turning these down even more, to be honest, because I want them to be super subtle. So we're going for -9, all right, and it might even get turned down even more after that. So with these, I might just add like these little shuffle bits. So let's have a listen. So it could go again like this, and then just swing it. So zoom in, hold down the command button, which allows you to sort of freely move it and put it off the grid. And maybe perk 3 could be moved in line with hats 4 so that they're swung by the same amount. Now, I was turning it down by 9, but let's turn it down by even more, -13 for example, because I want these to be just layered in the background. So hats 4, I'm going to turn it down quite a bit. And then this bit here, I'm going to shuffle. You know, it's called a shuffle. So when you've got a like that, it's like 2 hits in a row like that. It's kind of a shuffle. And that comes from breakbeat. And in fact, I'm going to add a breakbeat in a second and show you what I mean. But for now, let me just put these in. And then we can just duplicate that a few times. Wait. So highlight everything, Command and D, that duplicates it, and then just put it where it's supposed to be, and zoom in and make sure it really is where it's supposed to be. Alright, now let's listen. Right, so I'm going to press Command and S to save this now. And what was I on about when I said breakbeat? Right, well, let me give you a really brief explanation of what a breakbeat is. So back in the 80s and 90s, when people started making electronic music, including hip-hop and electro and stuff like that, when they wanted to get some drums, they would sample an old school soul or funk tune, and sometimes in these funk tunes they would have a part halfway through the tune where all the rest of the instruments would stop, including the singer, and they would just allow the drummer to have a little drum solo, and they called it a break. Everyone's taking a break except for the drummer. So what you can do is you can sample that break, and it's just a little drum solo, and it's very funky, and they used them for hip hop, and also it's basically the sound of jungle drums and drum and bass drums. And these are some absolute classic breaks. Here's one called The Funky Drummer. All right, and then there's one called the Hot Pants Break. So these are extremely popular in liquid drum and bass. And then this one's called the Think Break. And you may recognize him saying, "Yeah, woo!" And if you don't recognize it, well, if I pitch it up, then you will. Now, the Think Break is a special one because it's actually got various parts to it. Excuse me. And if I pitch it up by 3 or 4 semitones. Right, let me just mute everything else. Do you recognize his little, yeah, woo? You've probably heard it in loads of different liquid and jungle tunes. So That's something that people love to throw in, and if you've never heard that before, now you know where it comes from. It comes from a tune called Think About It by Lynn Collins, and that's actually James Brown, I think, who's saying, yeah, woo! So what you do with these is, right, you turn warping on, and what you want to do is, this is like each section is 1 bar. So what you do is you grab the end of the MIDI clip and hold down your shift button and just drag it so that it's 1 bar long. Now when you play it, as you can tell, it's a bit faster, and you can even play it with your drums and see if it's in time. Now let me turn it down because it's sounding louder than the rest of the drums. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to cut up, and I'm sorry that it's taking time, but I'm going to just chop up all 4 parts of this, and we're going to choose some good bits to use. So it shouldn't take me too long. So with each part, you just put it so that the kick is on right on the start of the bar, like that. Maybe bring it in, tidy it up. And then, as I was saying, each one is 1 bar long. So you go to the end of it, tidy it up, and then making sure that warping is turned on, you just click it, hold shift, and drag it to 1 bar long. And just to keep things moving, I'm just going to quickly go through all 4 super quick. So again, you look for the gap of silence. Now you might be lucky enough to find that you can find this think break as a sample with all of these parts like chopped up ready for you, but I've got one where there's these gaps, so you've got to do this. It's good to show you what to do because you might end up finding a similar sample to mine. You might find yourself having to do this. So turn on warping. So just let me explain a little bit about what warping is. It's Ableton Live's time stretching algorithm. So if you've got a sample and like in this case, it's a bit slow, so it's going on for longer than a bar in terms of our timeline, right? So to stretch it, you can either stretch it longer or you can stretch it shorter, and it uses warping. Now I've pitched this so that it's +5 semitones higher, so that I wanted to make it so that James Brown is sounding all squeaky, but you can time stretch without changing the pitch at all. So using this Ableton Live's time stretching technology, you can have him going squeakier, you can have him so that his voice gets deeper, or you can just have him so that his voice stays exactly how it usually is, but it's just changed in timing so that it's fast enough for drum and bass. So what I'm doing here is when I click on the line, I press Command and E, which stands for edit, and then that just like chops it and puts it, splits it into several clips, so that that's one clip, and I should be putting that to the line there, 5. So with a bit of luck now, when I play this, all these parts should be in time. Hang on. But I did turn this one down by, as you can see, -7.66. So let me grab these others and go into here and bring them down by -7.66. Now when I play it, let's see, fingers crossed. Now there is a little bit of a error there, nothing too major though, so you just do like that and then time stretch it so that it's perfect. And you're going to see in a second that that's not really that important, because it's just some little slices of this that I'm going to be using. So Like, for example, what I really want, you know, before I was saying about shuffles. So basically, it's this bit that just goes and you can decide to use the little bits of speeded up James Brown if you want, but in this particular tune, all I really want is this. Just that little bit of a shuffle. In fact, maybe I want some kicks and snares, so I'll show you how to do it. I'll show you how to remove James. Alright, so if you want to make a loop of the think break where you've basically removed the squeaky bits of James, you can just take the kicks and snares that don't have him and copy them and put them together. So what we're going to do is we're going to put it together here between bars 5 and 6. So go through, find yourself a nice kick. Not that one because he's there. I mean, the first one's good, so I'll just copy that and I'll put it here. And then you can find yourself a good second slice, put that there. And then a snare. In fact, I quite like this whole bit. So that's 3 slices in a row. I'll put them there. So now it goes. And then we're going to want a sort of one more kick and a snare and a shuffle. So it could be the first kick again, or it could be this one. Try that one there, and then a snare, not that one. How about this? Kick and shuffle, sorry, snare and shuffle. Alright, let me highlight this bit and press Command and L to loop it and see how this sounds. So that's how you can basically make a little loop of the think break and remove the little squeaky voice if you want to. You know, as I say, I don't mind if you leave him in there. I think sometimes it's appropriate. Other times it can get a bit annoying and repetitive, so just wanted to let you know how you can do it to just remove him, and you can just use this break as normal. So now I've just put that there and duplicated it a few times, so that we've got our 4 bars and it's just going along with it. And then what you want to do is mix this in to taste. So let's play the track so far. This is what we've got. And then if I gradually fade up our fader, now another little trick you can do here is, if I just go back a few steps, one thing you can do is take the kicks and snares and bring them down a bit. So remember, Command and E is edit, right, or split. So Command and E, so here we've just got the kick slice, and what you can do is just bring these down and looking visually, just kind of bring it down so it looks like the rest of the break and it's not sticking out too much. Now, obviously, on its own, this would sound ridiculous. It'd sound like the kicks and snares are stupidly quiet and doesn't sound good. But remember, we've got our own kicks and snares playing, and these are just like layered underneath. And what we really want from this break is this bit here. That's the shuffle. But it sounds a bit weird if you just use the shuffle and nothing else. It's like a bit gappy. So what you can do is use the whole lot but turn down the kicks and snares. Now let's have a listen. So I'll just duplicate all this again. So we got it 4 times. And just like before, I'll turn the fader all the way down. And by the way, I usually like to have this mixer like that, tall mode. I was saying in the last live stream, the reason why is because when you want to make really fine adjustments, it's easier when the mixer is taller. You can just make these really minute adjustments. And I was saying last time that if you think about when you see pictures of a real recording studio and they've got like a massive mixing desk, their faders are quite long. And I think that's the reason why, you know, is because it makes it more accurate. and they call it resolution. Like, you've got more resolution on your faders. Anyway, so let's play the drums and piano and gradually fade in the think break until it's just the right level. Alright, so I'm just going to press save there. And, you know, you might decide at some point that you don't like the sound that you've come up with for your piano. Well, the great thing about MIDI is that the notes are there and you don't have to keep the instrument that you've chosen. So, for example, if I go into Instrument Rack and go back to our little piano section here, you can have a look and you might find the grand piano. And what about if I just drag the grand piano onto that MIDI track and just sort of replace the instrument that was there? Now when I play it, so that just completely replaced the instrument, and to me it sounds better, so I'm going to hit save. Now, there are also, I mean, I've showed you how you can use an instrument from within Ableton, but what about if you're the type of person that likes to use VST plugins, for example, ones from Native Instruments? You can drag one in and choose your favorite. For example, I like to use this Scarby Mark 1 E-piano, and then if you want to, you can just drag a MIDI clip onto it and hold down the Alt button. That's just copied that MIDI information onto our Scarby Mark 1. Now what I'm going to do here is delete these top notes. Delete all of these so it's just the chords. So now Contact and the Scarby Mark 1 sounds like this. I want to talk to you a little bit about velocities. So at the bottom of a MIDI clip, you've got this section here and you can drag it up to see it a bit better, and it's called velocity. Now, velocity means how hard you're hitting the piano. So if you imagine a real piano or a MIDI keyboard, you can either press the keys softly or you can press them harder, right? And that value is reflected here, and I don't know why, but it goes between 1 and 127. So they've just chose a random number. It happens to be a maximum of 127. Now, by default, when I put these notes in, it just chose 100. But what you can do is select everything by pressing Command and A, and then bring these down. Now, VSTs like the contact patch that I'm using, what they've actually done is they've sampled this electric piano at all different velocities, meaning that when you bring these down, it will actually play it like as if the piano player played it softer. So listen now. And to me that sounds a lot more smooth, but obviously it's also sounding a bit quiet. So there's various different ways how you can turn it up. So this is what the contact patch looks like. And if you want, you can just turn it up within here. There's like a little level control. So now what you've ended up doing is you've ended up making it sound a lot smoother, but still the same volume. And I want to shout out my man Greg, because he's in the know about MIDI, and he says the binary system that MIDI follows, the 128 numbers start at 0. So it's 0 to 127. So it's all technical stuff, but basically if you want to make an instrument play harder or softer, you've got the option to. So let's layer contact and grand piano together. And let's have a listen with the drums. Alright, so who thinks I should make the bass next, and who thinks I should make a luscious pad next? Just let me know in the chat, and we're going to make both, but it's just whichever one you think should come next. In the meantime, I'll just keep playing the loop. So within Ableton Live, you've got a lot of different instruments. Big up Aaron. I'm glad you're learning, and it makes me so happy to be able to pass on some of this stuff. And like I say, if any of you guys actually end up making a liquid drum and bass tune with some of the techniques you've learned in these tutorials, please send me a link to it, because I'd love to hear it. So we've had several votes for the bass, so let's go. Now in Ableton Live, you've got various different instruments, and one of them is a fairly new synthesizer called Wavetable. So if you drag that in, it looks like this. So you've got I'm going to just explain. I'm getting a bit of a sore throat actually. Let me just drink this. So let me just explain the different sections of this. Now the main section is this waveform. And you've got these selectors to select all different shapes of waveform. But the basic one is very clever, because it gives you all the main basic shapes of a synthesizer within one, and it's got this slider that goes between them. So the bottom one is a sine wave, and as you move the slider up, it morphs towards a triangle wave, it morphs towards a sawtooth wave, and then it morphs towards a square wave. And if I press a key on the MIDI keyboard, you can hear how they all sound. So this is the sine wave. It's very smooth sounding, and as you move it up, it gets a little bit more edgy sounding. And then moving it up, it gets even more edgy, and it starts to sound actually a bit harsh. And then moving it up, it sounds more like a bleep from an old school computer or something. So there's the classic shapes. And then obviously the key that I'm pressing now is a bit high up the keyboard. So what you can do is, if you're using your computer MIDI keyboard, the Z and the X actually change the octave. So if you press Z and then go back to the same key, sounds like that. Press Z again, sounds like that. Okay. Now one thing I always say is, what you want to do is, if you go to audio effects and choose the spectrum, that's a spectrum analyzer, which is going to show you whereabouts in the frequency spectrum these notes are. So press it again. You'll see that it is technically sub-bass. It's under 100 Hertz, but we're going to want to go a little bit lower than that. So press Z one more time. All right. Now, you may not be able to hear that if you are listening on your phone speaker, but it's there and it's very low. Okay. So that is a sine wave, It's a pure waveform which doesn't have very many harmonics, which is why you won't be able to hear it on your smartphone speaker. But listen what happens when I move the slider up. Now, even if you're listening on the smallest, weakest speakers, you should be able to hear this. Why? Because if we look at the spectrum analyzer, you're going to see that as well as the fundamental frequency, you've got all these other frequencies that are added in, and they're called harmonics. Alright, now we're not going to be using anything that dirty for a liquid track. So we're going to want to find somewhere a happy medium, somewhere in between this dirty range and the sine wave. So probably just somewhere like here. So it just adds a bit of warmth to it, you know what I mean? Now we're going to want to add some movement to the bass, and the way how you can do that is with an LFO. Now LFO stands for low frequency oscillator, and what that does is it kind of wobbles things, and you can assign this LFO to wobble different things within the synth. So for example, this slider that I've been talking about can be wobbled up and down, and the way how you assign the LFO to different parts of the synth is with this section called the matrix. Now the matrix is a grid of different things like envelopes and LFOs along the top, different parts of the synth down the side, and each time you touch something within the synth it appears here in the grid. For example, this frequency filter frequency, you move it, touch it, and look how it appears there in the matrix as one of the options that you can start to modulate with your LFO. So we're gonna make it move both of these. So LFO1, you just go to a square where that what's it called? It corresponds with the wavetable position and LFO1, which is this box here, and just drag upwards and create a bit of a value there. So it's best to do a very subtle value, so I've chosen like 6.2. Now when I press the key, watch what happens to the wavetable. It's subtly wobbling it. Now what happens if you think that's wobbling a bit slow? There's a rate here, and right now it's on 1 Hertz. So you can drag that upwards and watch what happens to the wavetable. It wobbles faster. Now, let's go back to the matrix, and you know, before I was talking about this frequency, filter frequency cutoff, right? Now, LFO1 with the filter frequency cutoff, drag it up a bit, put a value in. Let's just do the same, 6.2. Now watch what happens when I press the key. It's wobbling that too. So that's just a couple of things that you can wobble, and you can go mad and wobble other things. For example, there is a resonance here. Now it's good to turn that up a bit, but if you wanted to, you could even make the LFO wobble that, and you can see it going up and down. So there's all sorts of things you can do, and one thing I would probably recommend is to put in the MIDI notes first. So we'll just highlight a section and press Shift, Command and M, and we've got our MIDI clip, and you can see the piano roll here. Now, you know, I don't really know much about music theory, but we can at least like try to figure out what these notes are. So it looks like usually you would go, if this is like a minor triad, then this would be an F and a D sharp and a C and a C sharp, right? So we could just take these notes and put them in and see how that sounds. So we could start with an F. Obviously that's too high, so shift and down puts it down an octave, shift and down one more, and one more. But like I was saying before, make sure you always look on the spectrum analyzer to make sure it's not too low, because you want your fundamental frequency to be above 40 really, because people who've got kind of decent speakers in their car or a hi-fi or monitors or like a decent set of headphones, they can usually hear 40 hertz, but they probably can't hear 30 hertz. So I wouldn't really go any lower than 40. So if we look at our F that we've just created, it's the lowest note of it is 44, so that's fine. But you wouldn't really want to go any lower than that. So when we put in our next one, which was a D sharp, we're going to have to go with the higher D sharp, not the lower one. Okay, so let's press Command and D, duplicate it, and then put this up to D sharp. And then it goes down to C and then C sharp. So it basically does this. So once you've put your notes in, now is when you can start really messing around with all the different parameters of the synth to make the bass line sound, as Juice Kicks Up put it, cool liquid bass lines, filtered modulated type sounds. And by the way, there's something I never mentioned. Over here on the left side of the synth, there's this button that says sub. And if you turn that on, that's going to give you an extra oscillator that is sitting underneath the main one. And it's basically just going to be a sine wave fattening it up. Nice one, E.E. Wilson. I'm trying, you know. So anyway, one thing I wanted to show you as well. So this is what we're going to do is we're going to split this into two. So with this one, this is going to be our kind of mid bass. And to make it have, do you remember I was showing you those harmonics on the frequency spectrum analyzer, which are here? What we want to have is a lot of that going on, which is the mid bass. So this is going to be the sort of more audible bass that you're going to hear, even if you've got kind of shit speakers, pardon my French, then you're still going to be able to hear this. And then there's going to be another layer of bass, which is going to be the kind of bass that you feel, which is the sub bass, right? So we've got a mid bass and a sub bass. And that sounds terrible, so I'm going to undo that. So what I'm going to do is the mid bass is going to have an EQ on it, and this might sound counterintuitive, but I'm actually going to roll out the sub bass of it, and you'll see why in a second. So this is going to be sort of at around 100 hertz. There's going to be this crossover. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get another wavetable. Go to Instruments, Wavetable, drag that in. This one, we're going to keep it on sine wave. So in this one, what we're going to do is, let's just have a look at what frequency our wobble was at. So LFO1, it was at a rate of 3.76, right? In this one, I'm going to do the same. Put the rate to 3.76. Now the crucial difference of this one is, in the matrix, we're going to make it wobble this control over here, which is the volume control of our sine wave. And it's called Oscillator 1 Gain. So I'm just going to crank that up a bit. Now let's have a listen. Oops. Next thing I need to do is drag this MIDI clip there so it's got the same notes playing. Now, only the people who've got decent speakers or headphones are going to actually hear this layer. So if you can't hear it, don't panic. You will when you're in the club or in someone's car with a massive sub. And another trick that I need to just show you is, let me press undo. Select all of these notes and zoom in a bit and just like holding down Command, just drag it back a little bit so that one note doesn't run into the next one. Now, you're not going to actually notice this when they're playing. There's not going to be an audible gap, but what it does is it just makes 100% sure that one note doesn't run into the next, because if it does, then it just kind of makes this horrendous mess. And this is something I've learned from experience. So just make sure the notes don't run into each other. As I say, you have to zoom right in to actually see the gap. But when I play it, all right, and I'll tell you why this is happening. And I saw this on last week's stream. Why this is happening is this. If you go to amp, look, this release is on 600 milliseconds. You need to turn that down. And also turn up your attack a bit as well. What we're really trying to do here is take away the clicks. So there's no click at the beginning, there's no click at the end of each note of the sub bass. So now what you should be left with is just some smooth sine sub that's going on underneath. And if we look at the frequency spectrum analyzer, this is just occupying the sub range. And then, yeah, maybe a little bit more attack. And then also, here above 1K, you've got these harmonics that you don't want. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to get rid of that with an EQ. So do that. All we really want is anything under 100, but just to you know, be cool about it, we'll put it to 166. That's just making sure that if there is anything around here, then we'll let that through too. But now let me play the two bass layers together. So what we should have is one of them is taking care of the mid bass and nothing below 100. One of them is taking care of the sub bass and nothing above 100. So, and in fact, even the one that's supposed to be the mid range can also be brought back a bit like this. Why? Because there's going to be a load of instruments. All right. So one last thing, I'll just turn up this attack a bit more. And let's hear how everything's sounding. Now, depending on what kind of headphones or speakers you're using, you should be able to hear it kind of rumbling along nicely. But it's not just like a solid sub note, it's actually moving a bit, so that's cool. With the one that's the mid bass, because that's not actually right down there, you are actually free to put that in a bit of stereo with some spread if you want, or you can use chorus on it, you can use all sorts of different effects on it. Now at this stage in the game is usually when I start to group things, so it's good to have your project organized into all different groups. And the way how I do that is, well, first of all, it's good to just rename them as something really simple. So that one, I'd just call it the piano. I'm going to call that drum rack. Well, it was already called drum rack. This is the think break. This one was the Rhodes. And then we've got mid bass. And this is sub bass. Now, I usually go for 4 different groups if it's a vocal tune, and I go for 3 different groups if it's a non-vocal tune like an instrumental. So in this case, we don't really have any vocals yet, so we're going to have 3 groups, and the first one is drums. So even though right now, well, I guess we do have 2 drums tracks because the think is drums as well, right? So highlight them both. So hold down, so click one of them, hold down shift, click the other one. Now you've got them both highlighted, and then press Command and G, and it groups it together, and you can see it says number 2 group. Now Command and R will allow you to rename it. So you see it sort of highlighted the name there, and you can delete that, and then you can write the actual name of this group. Now I've got a little system where if it's a group, I'll put it in capital letters, and if it's just a normal track, I'll put it in normal text, and that way at a glance you can tell whether that's a group. And another way of telling, of course, is that in the little circle there it's got lines, and in a normal one it's got a play button. So the capital letters thing isn't really needed, it's just a habit that I got into. So next group is going to be the bass, and I usually like to have the sub bass and then the mid bass. So put the sub bass on top, then the mid bass. So then click one, hold down shift, click the other one, they're both highlighted. Command and G to group, Command and R to rename, and then type the name of the group in capital letters. And if you get into the habit of doing this, you just start doing it really quickly and just whizzing through it, you know. And then you've got the piano and the Rhodes. They're both just like regular instruments, and I usually call this group Instrum because it's just full of regular instruments, and I can't be bothered typing the entire word. So you've got drums, bass, and Instrum. They're the groups that I use. And then if I'm working with a rapper or a singer or something, then I'll record all of their vocals and put them in the fourth group called vocals. So now is a good time to hit save, Command and S to save it. And let's have another listen to the loop and see what needs doing next. So going back to the wavetable, there's this pad sound that I learned how to make, and I wish I could remember the YouTuber that I learned it from, because I did learn it from a tutorial on YouTube. So I'm going to find the original tutorial I learned it from, because I really should be crediting the guy. But big up that guy anyway. So what I usually do is to put this onto vintage. So it's you've got all these different waveform styles, and vintage is one of them, and then within that you've got this one called mini waves, and it's just got all these different mad waveforms, and as you move the slider up and down it goes through them all. So I put the slider to about 50%, and then here's something we didn't use in the you know, Wilson, the thing is, if you do happen to have a crash and it just like crashes and your Ableton isn't open anymore, all you do is you just reopen Ableton, and 99% of the time it will say, do you want to recover your work from the undo history? And you just press yes, and you're back to where you were. Now there is the odd time when that doesn't work and you have actually lost stuff, and it's happened to me. So you do need to get into the habit of saving, but at the same time you shouldn't really be too scared that if you have a crash then you're going to lose everything, because you're probably not going to. So anyway, oscillator 1 and 2, put them both onto the same type, which is vintage, and then mini waves. All right, now something the last patch that we were doing with the wobble, we just had one filter, but you can actually turn on the other filter, and then what you can do is here you can put there's these modes, and it's serial, parallel, or split. You can choose split. Now you've got these two filters, and you can move the two frequencies independently of each other, and you want to turn up the attack by quite a lot, so this is going to make it just fade in nicely. Now going into the LFOs, put one LFO, we're going to make these really slow, so for example 0.11, and then the other LFO, maybe I'll put it to 0.14 or 16. So they're like similar, but they're both really slow. Going into the matrix now, we've got our two LFOs set up to wobble really slowly, and we've got our mini waves on oscillator 1 and 2, so we want it to modulate this slider a bit, so that's called OSC1 position. So LFO1 will make it move that, and I also want it to move the filter frequency position. So I'm just when I put these values in on the matrix, I just put them like quite a small number, but you can actually go all the way up to 100%. I'm putting in like 9 point something or 7 point something, you know, small numbers. Go to oscillator 2, move the slider so that appears in the matrix, and then LFO2, we're going to make it move slider 2. Again, small numbers, maybe even smaller this time. And then we've got frequency filter cutoff 2. We're going to make the LFO2 move that. And I'm sorry if this is like just way too complex, but eventually you're going to see that it's worth it because it's going to make a really nice pad sound. So the last thing is, I think, if we go to unison here, put this on classic and then put it up to more than one voice, for example 5 voices, and we're going to need some MIDI, and I'm just going to cheat and grab the MIDI from the Rhodes and put that in there. So drag that down, hold down the Alt button and let go. And there it is. Alright, now let's have a listen. Hopefully this sounds like a cool pad. So it doesn't really, but one more thing is I'm just going to put the EQ8 on there and take out a lot of the top end and also take out a lot of the bottom end. So it's just got this concentrated mid-range section. So it might sound a bit not that great at the moment, but don't worry, we are going to sort it out. And also LFO, something I didn't mention before. With these LFOs, there's this little tiny button with an R, which is called re-trigger. Now, watch what happens to these filters every time there's new notes. You see how they just jump back and then keep doing the same thing? Now if I turn off re-trigger for both the LFOs, now watch this. They just keep moving, but they don't keep jumping back to where they were. Now with this MIDI, one thing you can do is just put it down and have a listen now. Actually, I'll put this back up to where it was. You see how the LFOs are moving so slowly that it's just gradually moving up and down on this thing, and you can make these values bigger so that you should see it go through more of the range. But with the filter, I would probably make it a smaller value so it moves less. So now that you've made that, and you can see that I've like really restricted it down using the EQ so that you've not got any low end or any high end. It's literally just this little band in the middle. And then what you can do is to try and give it, to make it even more paddy, what you can do is get the delay, put that on there, and then get a hybrid reverb, put that on there, and then maybe even, okay, put the delay on ping pong mode. And what you're really trying to do is just make this soundscape, so it's no longer sounding like just a load of chords. It's actually just this sort of, like I say, it's more just like a big random pad of soundscape. And you can also, there's another tool here called the auto pan. You can put that on there. Now the auto pan, as the name suggests, it automatically pans it from left to right, and you can click this little note, and that will put it as a value of like the rate. You can put it on a 16th, an 8th note. You can put it longer so that it pans from left to right once every bar, or even more, like 2 or 3 or 4 bars. So let's try 2 bars, and then the amount, you can turn it up. You can have it on 100% or you can have it on less. And if you're wearing headphones now, you should be hearing it gradually move from left to right. So as I was saying before, everything that's like an instrument type thing gets put into this group called Instrum. So I'm just going to rename this as pad, and I'm going to put it into Instrum. So now it's time to add something else. One thing I like to do is at the end of 16 bars, just make it have this like a different type of, you know, when a drummer is playing a tune and they get to the end of 16 bars and then do like a drum fill and like, well, obviously we don't have a real drummer, but you can kind of replicate that by making a change in the pattern, or you can just bring in a totally different break for a second. That's something that I like to do. So let's go back to our jungle breaks and have a listen to some cool ones. So, I mean, it could be that. I know this Scorpio one's got a good fill. So let's just use that for the sake of example. Right, I'll close the browser. So I'm going to do from there to there. All right, let's drag it right down. And I just want that, but it does need to be completely on time to the grid, so just put that on there at the end. Oops. Let me put this over here so I can hear what I'm doing. So just like before, you need to make sure warping's on, and then just like get yourself what you think is 1 bar, and then drag the end of it so that it actually is 1 bar, and then hopefully that's like on time, right? So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to copy and paste our drums until there's 16 bars of it, so like that. And then in the last bar, maybe it's the last half a bar, right, and I'm just going to delete all the rest of the drums, so it's just literally this. So then when it loops around, you got your drums going as normal for 16 bars, and then right at the end it goes like this. Oops. It goes like this. And obviously you need to sort of refine it a bit. Now I want to show you about making a reversed crash. So as the name suggests, all you need is a crash and then you need to reverse it. So where do you find a crash from? Well, obviously you can find it in sample packs, but also within Ableton, you might need to add this on, but there's these packs called Session Drums Club, Session Drums Multi-Mic, and within here you've got these drum kits. So what you do is you just find a good drum kit, whichever, drag it in, and then it comes up with a drum rack, and you can listen to the crashes within the drum rack. For example, that one. Now you just make just like before, you highlight a section and Shift, Command and M to make a MIDI clip, and then that wasn't the one, it was this one. You just put a little note there. And before, do you remember I was talking about velocities? Now these drum kits here have velocities. They recorded the crash at all different velocities, so you can decide that you want it to hit hard like this, or you can bring it down so that the drummer is hitting the crash much softer like this, and it's barely audible. But obviously somewhere about 3/4 of the way up is probably appropriate, or maybe a bit more. Alright, so once you've got that crash there, what you can do is commit by flattening it. So there's a couple of ways of doing this. You can resample it, or another easier way is right click on the track and go to freeze track, and Ableton is going to create a bit of an audio for that. But when it's in its freezed state, you're not completely committed. You do have the option to go back by unfreezing it, but if you flatten it, now you're properly committed. So right click, flatten the track. Now you've basically just got that crash as audio there, and you can play it like this. Now it's got the main bit, and then it's got the tail, and it goes on for ages. But what you want to do is just put them into one audio piece by clicking one of them and holding down Shift and clicking the other bit, so you've got them both selected, and press Command and J, and that joins it together into one big piece of audio. Now once you've done that, you can duplicate this track, and now with this one you can go into it, and there's these, so you double click on the audio clip to go into it, right? Now you should see it down here like this, or you can drag up to sort of full screen it, but either way what you're going to see down here is this button that's got the arrows going both ways, and if you click that, it's going to reverse the sample, reverse the audio clip. So you can see our top one has got the crash going normal forward like this, and then the bottom one has got it going the other way, and it sounds like this. Alright, so the little thing that I just made at the end with the Scorpio break, the sort of drum fill, hopefully layering this reverse crash with it will make it sound better. So let's just play everything 16 bars and see how that sounds. So It's all right, but the Scorpio, there's something wrong with the Scorpio brake. Basically, it's not sounding convincing. So it probably should be an entire bar. So let's try it like that. And maybe I'll like put these a bit more on the grid. So what I'm doing here is I'm just double clicking these yellow warp markers and then moving them around. And I'm just trying to make it sound a bit more in time because it was sounding a bit offbeat. So try it like this. And also another thing is that this Scorpio brake can't be louder than the main drums because we don't want it upstaging our drums. So it needs to be kind of tamed a bit by either turning it down or EQing it or both. So I've just turned it down by 2.6, and then if I get the EQ 8 and try and make sure there's a bit less bass in it. You know, and just make sure it's not stealing the limelight because you don't want it to sound louder than the main drums. Alright, and this crash and rev crash, they can be put into the drums group. And make sure I like to put them sort of at the bottom of the drums group. So everything for me has got an order, you know. Main kicks and snares, then breaks, then hats and stuff, and then crashes. Let's see how it's sounding with those pianos and stuff. Alright, so the pad goes away. So at this stage, what I'm doing is like, it's just going round on a loop. What you can do is like mute and unmute things to sort of get an idea in your head of how the arrangement is going to be. So you might notice that after 8 bars or so, you know, it comes up, or after 16 bars, I might just mute the pad and then bring in the Rhodes to sort of give myself an idea of how I'm going to be arranging it. And then when it comes into a new 16 bar section, obviously there's the piano might change for the Rhodes, or the pad might come and go. But then there's other things you can do, because we had the think brake in there. We could switch that out for the hot pants brake, you know? So what I'll do now is I'm just going to mute the think brake and chop up the hot pants brake, put that in. And then when it comes to doing our arrangement, we can make it alternate between them. So hot pants brake, whack it in. And because this is a liquid tune, we want it to do the standard DNB pattern. So if you listen to the hot pants brake, okay, that's put it in as half time. So if you just hold down shift and drag it over so that it's 2 bars long, then it'll put it to the correct timing. So on the second half of the hot pants brake, it does a different pattern. It does this. What we want to do is get rid of the second half. And with the first half, just like before when I was tidying it up, I was just putting these, so you double click on the warp markers and put them onto the grid, and you can do that with as many or as few of these as you want. So obviously there's warp markers for every little bit of the shaker and stuff, but really you want to just put the kicks and snares on the grid and leave all the other little bits freeform timing, so it's still got a bit of that groove. Anyway, before I was showing you that if you sort of turn down the kicks and snares, then it's almost like compressing it, you know, but without having to compress it, so you don't end up with the compressor working hard to squash it all down. You can just do it yourself by turning down. And feel free to try this technique. If you don't like it, just use the compressor, or you can do both. But what I'm doing is I'm sort of looking at the waveform, and you can see where the kicks and snares are just like outrageously loud, and just bringing them down. So let's have a listen. And like I was saying before, on its own this would sound terrible, and it's like, what's going on there? But then don't forget, we've got some pretty loud kicks and snares of our own, so when we layer it with that, it sounds like this. Wait, that still sounds terrible. Alright, let me bring down the hot pants break and see if it sounds any better when it's quiet. Yeah, so that's it. It's only supposed to be layered in there, you know. Alright, and then swap it. And swap it again. And there's something weird going on with the last hit. And what it is that that bit wasn't quietened like that, you know. So I think you'll agree, even though the hot pants sounds atrocious like this by itself, it was only ever meant to be layered like underneath the main hits, and once it is layered, I think it sounds good. And once I've applied EQ and compression and all the rest of it, it will sound even better. So with that being said, so now we have the hot pants break layered and the think break layered, and what we're going to do is, when it goes from one 16 bar section to the other, it's going to switch breaks, just to make it a bit more interesting. So let's have a little bit of a simulation of how that's going to work. So I'll play 16 bars with the think break, and then I'll switch. Right, Scorpio, and then hot pants. And I think both of these breaks have got too much low end, so they're just interfering with the kick and making it sound real mushy. I'm only layering these breaks just to have a bit of the shuffle groove, so we don't really want any of the kick in there, so we just can get rid of it at 200 hertz. And then just drag that onto the other one. So if you want to move and if you want to copy an effect from one channel to the other, all you have to do is drag it over whilst holding down the Alt button. For example, if I want to move this EQ over to the crash as well, I don't mean move, I mean copy it over. So I want a high pass EQ on my crash, right? Hold down Alt, drag it onto the crash and let go, and there it is, but it's still on the original track, you know, so you've basically just copied it and it's there. And then I want to put that same EQ onto the reverse crash. I'll hold down Alt, drag it over, let go, there it is. If you've learned anything from this stream so far, I would really appreciate it if you could hit the like button, and that way it will be shared with more people on YouTube, and perhaps someone else will be able to learn something from it too, you know. So anyway, let me just show you something here with the drum rack. So you may remember right at the beginning how we put these drums together was in the drum rack. So our kick, snare and all the rest of it are here in this drum rack, and you can see them all here. Well, now the time has come for them to fly the nest and go their own way. So actually what I'm going to do is, first of all, I'm going to get rid of the ones that aren't playing anything. So these two here weren't playing anything. Get rid of them. And then this one, this one, this one, and this one weren't playing anything. So now we're just left with the ones that are actually playing something. So one by one, what I'm going to do is drag them from here over to this area that's just blank. And what you'll see is that it creates its own drum rack with just that kick on it. And if I go over here, if I look in these MIDI clips, all they have is the kick, right? So that's just put the kick onto its own separate track, and I'm just going to call it kick. In fact, let me use a capital letter. Alright, so let's go back to the drum rack. Now we've got the snare. Drag it over to the empty area and let go, and rename it snare. Now we've got the hats. In fact, the hats, all that's left in the drum rack now is basically hats. So what we're going to do now is rename it as hats. Now I'm going to bring the kick back into this drums group, and I'm going to bring the snare back into this drums group. Now that might look like pretty pointless. Why am I dragging things out and dragging them back in again? But now you're going to notice that I've got the kick, the snare, and the hats on their own channels. So that way I can use the kick for side chaining to the bass, which I'm going to explain in a minute, and I can decide if I want to put send effects on different things as well. So what do I mean by that? These knobs here are called sends, right? And if I turn on this little button here, this opens up these returns. So you've got a channel that's just got a reverb on it. You've got a channel that's just got a delay on it. And if I open those up, you can see what they look like. Here's the reverb one. Here's the delay one, right? It's literally just a channel. It's got no audio or MIDI. It's literally just a channel that you can send stuff to, as the name suggests. So the one that's got a reverb on it corresponds with send A. So any track that I turn up this little send A knob will send it to that reverb, and then you'll hear that sound with reverb on it. So let's give that a try with these hi-hats now. Listen what happens as I turn up send A. And you can see on this reverb channel over here now, you can see it's getting a signal. And if I solo that, you'll hear what's being sent to it, which is the hi-hats. Now one thing I always like to do is, even though there is this low cut here, I always like to add an EQ8 before the reverb and give it even more of a low cut, just to make sure no bass is going to the reverb. Now that that's in place, you can feel free to send stuff to the reverb, knowing that it's definitely not going to be sending any bass there. Now, you might also want to mess with this decay time on the reverb and make it a bit shorter, because by default it's on 2.5 seconds, which is quite long. And if you bring it down, if you imagine your average room, 2.5 second reverb time is quite massive, so that would kind of make you feel like you're in a huge hall, or you're in a room that's got no furniture in it. Usually you're in a smaller room that has got furniture in it, so if you want to kind of have a more natural feel of reverb, you would want something that's a bit shorter, right? So maybe something like that. I've put it to 710 milliseconds in this case. So far we've just got the hats going there, but don't forget that in this tune, as well as drums, we've already made our pad, Rhodes and piano. So it might sound nice for this pad to go there. Now I'll take off the solo. It might sound nice for this Rhodes to go there. Into the room, you know. So this is something like called a room reverb, and in fact I'm actually just going to rename that as room reverb. So that's, you can think of that as our room, and what do we want to put in the room. Now, to be honest with you, you want to put almost everything into the room other than anything that's like really low frequency. So you don't want to put your kick in there. You don't want to put your sub bass in there. Maybe you don't even want to put your mid bass in there, but you definitely do want to put in higher frequency things like hi-hats, maybe the snare, maybe these pads and Rhodes and piano. And that's just going to make it feel like the tune is less dry and more like it's playing in a room. Just experiment with the level of how much you send it though. You might want to put it on full whack. You might want to do like I've done here and put it just like a bit less than full whack. So let's try with the snare. And I'm just going to solo the snare, and you can hear how it sounds dry and then how it sounds when it's in the room. So obviously sending it a lot, one thing that you have to bear in mind is that drum and bass is quite a fast tempo, so you don't want the snare to be just completely washed out. If it was dubstep like I did last week, it would be totally fine to just send it all the way. But since we are making a faster genre, you want it kind of to have some reverb but not a load. So let's have a listen how it sounds like this. And then you've also got these crash and reverse crash. You might want to send those to the room reverb. Anyone got any questions? Let me know if they... Probably should have asked this before, but let me know if the audio volume is about level with the mic volume, so everything's sounding good. And let me know if you've got any questions for me. And obviously we're getting kind of towards the stage now where I might want to start to think about the arrangement. We've got 16 tracks worth of stuff. It's looping around nicely. It kind of sounds like a tune. We might want to put one or two more instruments in, or maybe some sound effects, but yeah, getting towards arrangement time. E. Wilson is asking me if this tune's going to be used on if this tune's going to be a real tune or if it's just for demonstration purposes. The answer to that is it just going to depend on how it turns out. I mean, my gut feeling is, to be honest with you, this piano sounds a bit cheesy, but the rest of the tune sounds alright, so maybe I'll just get rid of the piano and it might end up being a real tune. I like comedy music. I was actually laughing because I kind of accidentally spilt a bit of my tea down my t-shirt. This is live broadcast, anything can happen. Oh yeah, and then there's panning. I've not really spoken about panning, but I suppose that comes later when you're doing your mix down. But like for the beginners who don't know, this knob here that you can put to the left and right is panning, and listen what happens to this Rhodes when I put it all the way to the right. If you're wearing headphones, you should be hearing that through your right ear now. And then the piano, if I put that all the way to the left. So If I leave the pad in the middle and have the piano left and the Rhodes right, that really opens up the stereo spread a bit. And it's up to you whether you like do what they call hard panning, where you put it all the way, or you can be a bit more subtle with it and put it something like that. But like I say, that's I'm kind of getting ahead of myself, because that comes later when you're doing your mix down. So for now, I'll just leave them in the middle. And I guess it's all a matter of taste or a matter of workflow if you want to do these kind of things now or do them later. You know, like what I did with the room reverb, one might argue that that's something I should have done later during the mix. But, you know, this is kind of a walk through where I'm just demonstrating stuff, so I might not necessarily do it in this order. You might notice that I've basically not really put EQ on many things, like the kick, the snare hasn't been EQ'd. This drums group's got nothing on it. So some people might like to do the compression and stuff and the EQ now. Other people might like to just do the whole arrangement and then just leave it with no EQ or compression on until later. So there's many ways to skin a cat, as they say. One thing I could do is like go, maybe get rid of these two and then go. The piano is just kind of cheesy. I'm not really feeling the piano, to be honest. I might just get rid of it. Alright, let's put in let's try a violin. So you might need to install packs to get this, but once you've got your packs installed, if you go into instrument rack and go into orchestral, there's like loads of different instruments, and they're all multi-sampled, and some of them sound pretty good. So you've got cellos, French horns, glockenspiel. I'm laughing, but it might actually sound good. And then this marimba, that sounds like when you're trying to click on the wrong thing, and it's like. What else have we got? Strings ensemble, and then there's just the straight up strings by themselves, like violin solo. Shall I try a staccato? I guess you know what I'm going to do next. I mean, call me corny, but let's turn down these velocities and make it a little softer. And it's up to you, you know, like you can experiment with either, if you want it to be a bit quieter, you can do it with the velocities, or you can just turn it down and see which one sounds better, because maybe it was better with the original velocities, but just turn it down by 5 to 6 dB. Thank you, E.E. Wilson. You know, sometimes when I do a bit of a cheesy melody, I think to myself, I'm exceeding the cheese limit with this one. But I suppose there is, you know, needless to say, there is a lot of like much cheesier liquid drum and bass out there than this, so I shouldn't be so hard on myself with it. So yeah, what I did there was I just added a delay. I've put it onto like it's synced and it's on. What is it like? What's the 2? Is like half a bar. Sorry, it's 1/2 of a note. I don't know. It's on 2 anyway. Put it onto 2. You got the dry wet on 39%, feedback on 35%, and I turned on the ping pong. And what the ping pong does is it makes it bounce from left to right like that, and gives it this stereo effect, which sometimes can sound good, sometimes it can just muddle everything up and it sounds better in mono. So if you're wearing headphones, you can probably hear it bouncing from left and right. So Tay is asking me how I'm streaming this audio. Basically I'm using OBS, which is like the standard open broadcast software, and I've just got like, it's just called macOS Screen Capture. It captures the screen and all audio that comes from my computer. And last week I had an email come through and you just heard it go bling on the stream, so perhaps I need to mute all other system sounds just so they don't come through on the stream. But that's what's happening. And then I just have, like, in OBS I have another channel for my microphone, and I have the little meters and try and balance them, and I usually ask you guys if they're sounding balanced or whatever. Hopefully it's not too loud or too quiet. I just build up the tune like that. So now the violin staccato is I'm just giving it a violin, just giving it a rename, and then just drag that into the instruments group, and that's going to be another one that we use when we come to do our arrangement, you know. So basically what the idea is, now I've got violin, pad, Rhodes and piano. They're not going to all be playing at the same time. When we do the arrangement, we're going to draw for certain ones at certain times, and they're going to come in and out. So whilst we're here, what I was originally supposed to do was get a normal violin and just make that go with these like longer notes. So let me try that. In fact, I could be cheeky and just get the MIDI from the bass line and see how that sounds, because I know that that is just the long notes, the root notes, you know. So if I get the mid bass MIDI clip, drag that down to violin solo, hold down Alt to make sure it copies it, and it sounds like this. What? Wait, let me. Maybe it's because it's too low, but if you drag them, if you put them up to a higher octave, there we go. And the F2 needs to be up to F3. and then Command and A selects all of the notes, and then if you just drag them down, drag these velocities down, hopefully it'll sound like it's been played a little bit softer. And that can be panned to one side, you know, so let's play it with the pad. And then turn up the room reverb on that one to put it in the space with everything else. And then let's play it with its other violin. And they could be panned, you know, like the long violin could be over to the left, the staccato violin could be over to the right. And this is quickly turning into, I made, for any of you who've not seen it, like the last proper tutorial I did on my channel was called How to Make an Orchestral Drum and Bass Track. And that goes through how to layer up all of these different orchestral instruments. And if you've not seen it, I recommend watching it. And by the way, if you've been watching for a while and you've learned something from this live stream, please don't forget to hit the like button, because that's going to help more people see it. So this is what we've got so far. Let me just sort of go through the instruments in the order that we made them. So we started off by making a kick and a snare and some hi-hats, right? Then on top of that, I layered the think break. And as well as the think break, I also chopped up the hot pants break. And we have this crash. Okay, so that's essentially all the drums. We also have a reverse crash at the end, and we also have the Scorpio break doing a little bit of a roll or drum fill when we get to the end of the 16 bar section. After that, I showed you how to make the mid bass wobble within the wavetable synth, and it sounds like this. So if you're someone who joined the stream halfway through and you're like, how do you make that mid bass wobble? You'll be able to watch this once I've finished and go back to the beginning. You'll see how I made the mid bass wobble, and then you'll see how I layered it with the sub bass layer, which is basically doing the same thing, but it's just a sine wave. And then I started to do instruments, and the first instrument I did, I think, was, well, I did a different type of piano and got rid of it, but then this is the remaining piano. And then I kind of did the Rhodes, which is playing the same chords, but it's not got those melody bits. And then I made the pad. Oh, nice one, Sonos, or Sonos. Volume automation on the violins brings them to life so much. So these are little tips that, you know, you can, obviously when we're putting together MIDI instruments, we want to try and make them sound as realistic as possible. So that's a great tip, thank you. So there's the pad, and I showed you how to make this pad in the wavetable synth. And then we had staccato violin, bit of delay on it, and then we've got the other violin, which is just playing longer notes. So the idea is, when we put together the arrangement, we're just going to be drawing from this pool of instruments. So it might not be all of them playing at the same time, it might be pad and violins, and then 16 bars later it might be Rhodes and piano. So that's the pool of instruments. 18 tracks so far. So now it's time to hit save. Big up Eric. Started producing liquid drum and bass last week. So finding it hard to finish, and I totally can relate. And for me, even if I get it to a completely finished state, I'm still like, well, I can't release it now because it needs a proper mix down. It needs to sound better, blah, blah, blah. And then it ends up sitting on my hard drive for literally years. But a bit of an announcement. I think that in the springtime or early summer, I'm going to put out an album of around 12 liquid drum and bass tunes. So if you like the style of the tune that we're making today and you want to hear more of it, make sure you subscribe to this channel, because as well as all these tutorials and stuff, I'm actually going to be putting my music on here. So just sometime around May, maybe, there's going to be a full album of my liquid tunes. So with that being said, I've stalled it long enough, so it's time for the arrangement, okay? So I've pressed save, and the next thing to do is just grab everything, press Command and X, which is kind of scary because now there's nothing there. But what you want to do is decide how long you want your intro to be and paste. So for example, if you want your intro to be 32 bars, you just paste everything on bar 33, and then we've got this area here that's going to be our intro. Now what I would do is decide, some tunes start off with the full-on drums and bass playing, other tunes might start off really kind of quietly with just a hi-hat or a crash playing, or maybe even no drums at all, and just the pad or just like one of the instruments playing. So it's entirely up to you. And let's have a little show of hands. Who thinks this should be a tune that starts off with drums and bass playing? And who thinks this should start off like really gradually and fade in? While you guys are having a think about that, I'm just going to take a really quick pause, but I'll leave the music playing and I'll be right back. Alright, I'm back. So we've got basically the consensus is we're going to have a gradual, mellow intro. And what do you guys think? Because like sometimes, I mean, traditionally you would want, yeah, exactly, Eric, this is exactly what I was about to say, that like you want the DJ to have something to be able to know where you are, like rhythmically. So you want to have either a hi-hat or a crash or something, maybe a filtered break. And Sonos, you know what happened last week? Like my channel, full disclosure, yeah, my channel isn't actually monetized yet, but I'm on my way there. And last week somebody said, let's add a vocal, yeah. So I'm just flicking through loads of vocal samples, And anyway, after I finish the stream, I get this email saying this stream cannot be monetized because you've used someone's vocals in it. And I don't even think it was one that I properly used. It was literally just me flicking through samples and happened to play some copyrighted bit of vocal. So now I'll never make any money off that stream. It's all going to some Jamaican guy who said like 3 words in 1985. So gotta be careful, you know. But yeah, you're right. And actually, I've got a tune coming out. I'm in this group called Synaptics, and it's more of a, well, we do liquid drum and bass, we do like breakbeat and stuff. Got a tune coming out in spring as well. That's got an amazing female vocalist on it, and you're not going to believe how good she is. She's such a great singer, and she's like, when we recorded this tune, it's the only thing she's ever recorded, but she's just such an absolute pro that you would think that she's been doing it for years and years, you know. So the question is, so we're going to have a gradual intro, so I think it's going to have to be the pad maybe. So what you can do basically is, if you don't feel like, let's say for example, I wanted the piano to be in the intro, but I don't want it to be fully in the intro. What you can do is press on the track and press Command and D, and now you've got a totally duplicated version of the piano, right? And then you can make sure that the MIDI clips aren't both playing at the same time, so you can move one over. So let's say we put that first, right over here on bar 1. Now you can do whatever you want to this piano track, and you can, in fact, you can rename it as intro piano, and that way you've still got your main piano that you might want to bring in during the main section of the tune, but you've got this other one here, and then you can just get for example the auto filter, put that on there, choose this kind of bandpass shape, put that like that, and then here, do you remember, for anyone who was around earlier on in the stream, I was talking about LFO. It stands for low frequency oscillator. So you've got a LFO within the auto filter, and again you can put the rate on something fast or slow. You can have it in hertz, or you can put it on, you can use this note to sync it to the project with a 16th or an 8th note or a quarter note, etc, etc, right? And then as you turn up this amount, now you don't visually see the thing moving around unfortunately, but as I move this up, it's basically going to move the auto filter forward and backwards to give it some movement, so that's pretty cool. So now we've got, and you need to be subtle with it obviously, so just bring up the amount a little bit, something like that. Let me just loop this. So this is our first 4 bars of the intro. We've got a filtered piano. We might want to have our pad. Again, you know, sometimes it's good to duplicate the layer and have a normal pad and an intro pad. Now delete all of these from the main section and just move that one over there. Now with the intro pad, again, you might want to have the settings completely different to the normal pad that happens during the drop. Eric, you have my permission, mate. Just put your links to SoundCloud. Anyone who wants to put their SoundCloud, Bandcamp, YouTube channel, just put it all in the chat and we can all subscribe to each other and have a listen to each other's tunes, you know. It's like that's the idea of, that's what I want for this channel, is for it to be a bit of a community of producers who all push each other, you know. So as I've just done with the intro piano and intro pad, you can also do the same with a break. So we've got our breaks there, right? Got the hot prance break, the think break. duplicate one of them and call it intro think. Then now you've got that separated from the normal think break, which means you can do whatever you want to it. So what I'm going to do is actually with this, just delete it all, because I've just copied a little bit by pressing Command and C. Now I can paste my little bit there. Oops. There it is. And drag it out sideways. Why? Because you'll probably remember from before that I was messing about and like changing the volumes of the kicks and snares and stuff, but I don't want that for the intro. I also don't think I really want James Brown to be there, so no offense, James. What we're going to do is revert back to that. Get 1 bar's worth, like this. Press Command and C and copy it, and then delete everything. And then paste that here. But what I'm going to do is, I want all this to be the same volume, so let's just go through the slices and see what sort of volume things are. So we've got -17, -7, -7. So it looks like -7 is like roughly the average volume of it, so -7.6, you know. So I'll just put them all to -7.6. And then we're basically, what we've got is, we've got our chopped up break without any James in it, which we'll then be able to use in the intro and like manipulate and stuff, you know. -7.6. You know what, Eric? Your links aren't showing up, and I'm not sure if that's like because of YouTube's like not allowing you to, but if you just let us know what your SoundCloud name is, then at least we can look you up on there. Maybe I need to change my stream settings, and I'm sorry because obviously experienced streamers will have their settings dialed in, but maybe somewhere in the settings I need to allow people to put links. Anyway, what you can do here is now you can again put an auto filter on this intro think. You know what I mean? And move it around like that. So let's talk about automation. For the people that don't know, automation means making certain controls within Ableton Live move themselves. So for example, this frequency that's making this filter move up and down, I was just moving it around by hand, but what I want is for it to just move itself automatically, right? So in order to do that, what you do is this. Make sure your computer MIDI keyboard is turned off, and then once it's off, you just press the A key. Now A stands for automation, and that's going to bring up, you'll know it's on, you'll know you're in automation mode because you'll see the red line up here. Now cleverly, Ableton Live is so amazing, anything you touch brings a red line for that thing. So I'm touching the filter frequency, and here you can see auto filter frequency, but if I touch the resonance, now you'll see the red line for that comes up, etc, etc. So almost anything within Ableton Live can have a red line. Why is it important for it to have a red line? Because now you can draw in where that red line goes, up and down. So for example, we might want this to go, you click anywhere on the red line and it makes a dot, right? Now if I've put a dot at the beginning of this clip and a dot at the end, and then here in the middle, I draw it up like that. Now we're going to watch what happens within the auto filter. So the red line goes up and then it goes back down again. Now watch this auto filter. So it's moving. I've managed to make it move by itself, which is absolutely amazing. And just think of the possibilities within your Ableton Live project, if you start making almost everything move, you know, you're going to have such an interesting tune. Obviously, there is the possibility of taking it way too far, so you need to be careful, but it's really, really cool once you start diving into automation. So, for example, it could just go up like that and down again. Or on the second one, you could make it go up less, like that. So let's hear how that sounds with our other intro elements. So big up Jack Mono. Look out for his set Slightly Chilled Volume 1 on SoundCloud. Sorry, YouTube and Mixcloud. So this is a way how, before we were saying about how you want the DJ to have something to listen to while you're mixing it in, he or she is mixing it in, right? So now they've got this filtered break. So it's very subtle. But it's something for them to listen to while they're mixing it in, but without having to have the full-blown drums and bass in there. So we might duplicate this. And by the way, all I did was highlighted everything and press Command and D. That duplicates it, so now that section is 16 bars long. But somebody once told me, and this is like an unwritten rule, I suppose, is that if you have something that's looping, only let it play something twice before something changes and something else comes in or something goes away. So don't just have like this. So right now I've got the think break, I've got the intro pad and intro piano playing, right? They play twice. Now here, at bar 9, something needs to happen. Something else needs to come in, something else needs to disappear. All of the above, you know? And maybe this reverse crash is going to happen. Actually, the reverse crash, I'll tell you what, that'll happen. That'll happen there. And then so you can clearly see that we've got the intro is split into two 16-bar sections. This one here with the filtered break, and then this one here that doesn't have any break. And in fact, actually our intro piano should probably be in the second category, like there. So we start off with a pad and a filtered break. It's happened twice now, so something else needs to happen. Maybe violin solo comes in there. And then we got the reverse crash and it all breaks down and then it goes. That's when it really breaks down and we just got intro piano. And that's when it could be like just like a really subtle hi-hat. Building up. Something's going to build up. There's anticipation building. And then in this section, obviously, we won't be having any of these violins. It'll just be literally maybe drums, bass, and pad. So you can see how we build it up, right? So it's essentially, I mean, you can even see within Ableton, it literally has darker and lighter grey sections each 16 bars to sort of show you where to put your sections. So what I should do really now is, instead of, I need to stop muting and unmuting things and actually just put them where they're going to go. That muting and unmuting thing is just a sort of a way to sketch, you know. It's almost like doing a little live performance. You know, people, I used to use the machine, Native Instruments machine, and people definitely use the machine in that way, as in they make a tune on it, and then if they want to perform that tune live, all they do is just like mute and unmute bits. Right, so we're starting off. Filtered break. We've got the intro pad. 8 bars later, violin solo. Yeah, I need to change the level of auto filter. We've got the reverse crash. It all breaks down. Really quiet, really subtle. This could be where the vocal is if there is one. And then these Rhodes and piano aren't even going to come in until like much later over there. So what I've just done there is like, I mean, it's up to you how much of copy and paste style you want to make it. But what I've just done is just turned our 16 of drums into essentially a big long 64 bars. But obviously, every 16 at the end, it does a little Scorpio back in, you know. So you might find, oh yeah, that was it. So we've got the hot pants break and we've got the think break. So I'm kind of getting ahead of myself because we're supposed to be making the intro now, but just to demonstrate, we've got think break during section 1. And let me get out of automation mode for a sec. Ditch all this. And then section 2, ditch all the think break. So it's just alternating between think and hot pants. Back to the think. Oops. And then back to the hot pants. So let's hear how that sounds. Then that's when the Rhodes and the piano finally come in. And just because we're making the arrangement now doesn't necessarily mean we're done making new instruments, because you might think now the fourth section of the, you know, the fourth 16 bar section over here, you might decide that there needs to be a whole new instrument that you've not even heard before. So now could be time to make that. But anyway, let's go back to making the intro. Got the filtered break. Yeah, so the filtered break, I was sort of demonstrating to you that you can make this auto filter, have automation to move the frequency, right? But obviously I took it way too far. So we want this zigzag to be less over the top. So move the low points up, move the high points down, and make it more of a subtle zigzag. Oops. And it doesn't have to be totally symmetrical. In fact, it's probably better if it's not. Proper like lullaby type chiller. So before I was showing you when I showed you how to make the reverse crash, I was using these packs, right? And you've got Session Drums Multi-Mic. Now let's go back and choose a kit again. Could be anyone. Soft multi-rod. Well, we're trying to make a kind of a soft intro here, so we'll try that. Now the amazing thing about these Session Drums Multi-Mic is, you see here where you've got these three, the overhead volume, room volume and bottom volume. So every drum within here has been recorded with multiple microphones, as the name suggests. And then you can choose to blend them. So you can decide to just turn off the overheads altogether, or you can blend in more overheads. The room, you can take it out completely, you can blend a bit in, and then the bottom is like when you've got the snare, you've got a microphone underneath it, you know. So what I was thinking is just make a really subtle either ride or hi-hat pattern for here. So let's have a listen to some of these rides. So here, by the way, when you right click on here, you've got this menu and you've got all these different grids. So for example, a quarter note looks like this. So you've got the edge, you've got the bell, so they're the different parts of the ride cymbal. So let's put in some quarter notes and see how it sounds. And then select them all and bring the velocity down, because like I say, it's a really chilled intro part, and we want it to seem like the drummer is really softly hitting that ride cymbal. So alright, so actually it turns out I don't want quarter notes after listening to it, so let's try half notes. And as I was saying about the mics, so this is what it sounds like with all three. Now, if we get rid of bottom volume, doesn't make much difference. If we get rid of overheads, now the overheads is mainly what you're recording the ride with, I think. Let's get rid of room. Hang on. I've got the kick selected. What I need to do is go in and select this ride. Now I can mess with these. So let's get rid of the room. You've also got the tone. So if you bring that back, that definitely sounds better to me. It takes out some of the bass. If you wanted to, you could even pitch it up. So what I should be doing is listening to this with the intro piano. I think +1 sounds best, actually. Right, and we're going to need... Okay, so this goes into the drums group. So drag that up to the drums group and let go, and now it's in there with the rest of the drums. And I like to put it at the bottom of there, maybe above the crashes. And then we're probably going to want the reverse crash just before the drop. So just highlight this whole section and duplicate it, and that's going to put it in the exact right place. And let me unsolo. And I think maybe, is it just the last one needs to disappear? So if you've learned anything about arrangement so far and you like these techniques, make sure you hit the like button, and that's going to help this stream get out to more people, and hopefully some more people can learn a bit about how to make liquid drum and bass. Don't forget, this stream's been going for over 2 hours now, and obviously for the guys who only got here recently, once it's finished, it will be pasted, it'll be uploaded onto my channel on YouTube, so you can watch it from the beginning. And it's crazy how quick the tune comes together, you know? It's mad to think that 2 hours ago this just didn't even exist. Now it's basically starting to sound like a tune, you know? So how about another orchestral element? So if we go into instruments, here's all these orchestral instruments. We've got trombones, all sorts. And I was kind of, when we scrolled past the glockenspiel section, I was starting to think, wonder what would it be like to have a glockenspiel. Actually, do you know what I like to put in sometimes? A bell. Let's see what other kind of bells we've got. So some of these are synthetic, you know, synthesized. Obviously that's not even anything like a bell, but I'm not talking about that kind of thing. I'm on about that, you know. So bring that in, make a little MIDI clip. So just highlight a section, Shift, Command and M. Now we've got our piano roll. So for example, if you press Command and A, that highlights all of it, and then you can just drag down the velocity together. So for example, and then it needs to shut up when it does the Scorpio break, you know. Yes, Tara Bass. Tara Bass is saying build up the reverb before the drop. That's a great idea. So we can automate either the sends to turn up, or we can put a reverb on something and then automate the wet dry to send to turn up. So basic bells, as you can see, there's all these controls within here. One of them's space. Obviously it's pretty easy to overdo it. And then we've got filter cutoff. And if you really want to see what any of this stuff is actually doing, so you might not have known that this basic bell is actually a wavetable synth. And then if you open it up, you can see that it's got all this other stuff as well. For example, filter cutoff. What's it controlling? Look, it's controlling that filter within the synth. Tone. Tone is actually moving the wavetable position. So it's a very basic bell, and it might sound ridiculous by itself, but when it's layered with some of the other orchestral elements, and especially once you've got to this point in the tune where you're like 2 minutes deep, you might be like craving for something else to come in, and then you hit with the in fact, you know what? This might be a bad idea, but I'm going to try it anyway. After 2 repeats of it, as I was saying, we could, what I'll do is, I'll change the colour of this MIDI clip here so we know that something's different. What we could do is drag it up and make it harmonise with itself. But the harmony layer could be lower in velocity. So it goes like this. That's a normal bell. Let me know. Is it good? Yeah, that's what I mean. That's what I mean, Chris rework. That was why I added the sort of harmonised part, but yeah, I totally agree. Just goes on and on, doesn't it? It could have a delay that sort of gradually gets, you know, the wet and dry automates so that it starts to have more and more delay on it. Why not? So what I was thinking is, so obviously we've got two distinct sections here. One of them's got the harmony, one hasn't. So it could gradually go up from 0 to 50%. Then it's just going to suddenly drop back down to 0. Wait. 50%? All right, 49 will do. Then it's going to go back up to 49%. One more time. And it sounds like this. All right, 49 or 50 will do, whatever. So, by the way, a little tip. Obviously, I'm struggling here. So what you do is, if you open up the track really tall like this, then before I was talking about resolution, this is the same. Because it's so tall, it means that it's much easier to get it bang on where you want it. So there's a little tip for you. And then once you're done and you've got it where you want it, you just drag the track back to narrow mode. All right, so what I've done there is I've automated the wet and dry of this delay to go from 0 gradually bit by bit up towards 50%. And then when the next section comes in, which has got this extra harmony layer, we're down to 0. And then we're gradually going back up again. Oops, sorry about that. Right, here's the intro. I'll let you hear the whole thing now. 2 minutes. Let's have a think about what it needs. I like the filtered break. Reverse crash into very subtle piano and rides. This could be where the female vocal comes in. But to be honest with you, for a track like this, some of you guys might be a member of Splice and get vocals like that, but like I was saying, I was working with that really amazing singer, and it's very rewarding when you do that, you know, when you actually get someone to record some singing over your tune. And I was saying before that this girl, bless her, she had 0 experience in the studio. I was literally like singing where to do the harmonies, and she'd never harmonized before at all, and she absolutely nailed it, harmonized with herself. And when she heard it played back, so that there's various layers of herself harmonizing, She just couldn't believe that was her. She's like, oh my god, I sound amazing. Bear in mind this has got hardly any EQ, no compression, no saturation. Everything's very raw. Sounding pretty good actually. Sometimes when it comes to that you can actually ruin your tune by compressing everything. And the harmony bells, it's not bad, you know. I chucked it together in like 2 minutes, so with that being said, that is basically how you make a liquid drum and bass track, a beginner's guide. What you can do is, if anyone's still got any questions, you can leave them as an actual comment on this video. And if you're up for it, what we could do is, like, next week we could continue with the same tune and actually turn it into a full-blown finished track, including mix and master. I'm gonna have to go now because I am kind of starting to get a sore throat from waffling, but I reckon we got pretty far in 2 hours. So if you enjoyed it, make sure you like the video, make sure you subscribe to the channel. And one last thing I'm going to do before I go, because I can kind of hear that there's a little bit of a, and I'm sorry that this has been happening the whole time, but I can hear that the low end is like totally full of mess because of the sub and kick together. So one last tip for the beginners who don't know: to do a side chain compression so that the bass ducks every time your kick happens, all you need to do is put a compressor on your bass group and then click this little arrow that opens it up and click side chain. Now you're going to need some audio from, so you need to open this up and choose your kick. Now this little graphic here, usually if side chaining's turned off, it's going to show you, let me just show you this. So if side chain is turned off, what you'll see in the graphic is your bass, right? When you're turning side chain on and you select the kick, instead of the bass, now you're seeing the kick in the graphic. And then all you do is bring the threshold down to an appropriate level, and you can see here the little orange number, and you can also see it better in these views, how much the bass is being ducked by the kick. So in this case, 4 dB, right? So every time the kick happens, the bass is being ducked by 4.7 dB, which is just making a little bit of room for that kick so they're not fighting each other. And then you'll need to also just change the attack and release and make sure that it's happening quite quickly. And very important that the release is quick, because as soon as the kick finishes, you want the bass to come back in again. Almost so quick that it's like subliminal and you didn't even notice it happening. So that's the final tip of the live stream. Thank you everybody for joining me. It's been a really fun evening. Thanks to everyone who's participated in the chat. And let me know if you think that we should continue with the same tune next week, or whether you'd like a different genre, because I'm open to both. But anyway, have an amazing